You've probably scrolled past a listing like this before. Government surplus property for sale, a grainy photo, a price that seems too good to be true, and a link that either goes nowhere or asks for your credit card up front. Most people assume that's the whole category: fake, dead, or a scam. A federal watchdog audit backs up half of that assumption and completely disproves the other half. The Government Accountability Office found that when the federal government actually sells a surplus property, the median time it takes is 3 years. One property took 20 years. That's not a broken link or a dead listing. That's just how slow this process genuinely is, which is exactly why so many of these listings look abandoned even when they're completely real. The other half of the problem is real too. The Better Business Bureau has documented actual fake government auction websites built specifically to look official that exist purely to steal your payment information. So here's the honest version of the claim in our title. Many government surplus listings you find online are years out of date or aren't real government listings at all, but some of them are exactly what they claim to be: real property sold or currently being sold by an actual government agency through an actual government channel. We verified 5 of them, start to finish, official listing page and all. One quick note before we go further. This is not real estate, financial, or legal advice, and buying government surplus property comes with its own legal process. Verify everything independently, directly through the official government channel, before you ever send anyone money, starting with one that's listed for sale right now, today, that you could go look up yourself before this video is even over. This one is listed, not sold. No auction date, no opening bid, nothing final yet, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. The current 51-foot cast-iron tower dates to 1932, replacing an 1827 original that was Rhode Island's first light on Narragansett Bay that wasn't marking a harbor entrance. Next to it sits a 3-bedroom keeper's dwelling built in 1889, plus a detached garage and storage shed, all on 1.3 acres. It's listed on realestatesales.gov, GSA's own official disposal portal, not a reseller site, as coming soon for public sale via online auction, a status that hadn't changed for months as of this research. There's no official reserve or opening bid published yet, but Warwick's own property tax records assess the land and structures at just over $1.5 million. Whatever it eventually sells for, the Coast Guard keeps a standing legal right to access the property afterward because the light itself is still an active aid to navigation. Here's the honest downside, and it's less about the property than about how GSA has handled it. Back in 2023, GSA had originally made this lighthouse available for a no-cost transfer to an eligible nonprofit or government entity under the Federal Historic Lighthouse Preservation Process. Then, in 2025, GSA reversed course and moved it to a paid public auction instead, a switch that caused real local confusion, with at least one Rhode Island state representative publicly pushing to spare it from auction and keep the free transfer option alive. That's a real, current, verifiable listing. You can pull it up yourself right now. What it isn't yet is a finished sale. For an example of what happens when a government listing stays open for years without ever quite closing, the next one is the clearest case we found. This lighthouse has been up for sale, on and off, through 5 separate GSA auctions spanning 17 years, and not one of them has ever closed. Built in 1874, it's a 51-foot octagonal tower on the National Register of Historic Places, sitting about a mile offshore in Long Island Sound, with a 2-story keeper's dwelling attached, reachable only by boat. In 2008, GSA planned to transfer it at no cost to a preservation nonprofit, but the deal collapsed in a dispute over the state's submerged land lease, and the group eventually sued the federal government. A public auction followed in 2011. 3 bidders, a winning bid of $45,000, and then the top bidder backed out after learning about the historic preservation restrictions attached to the tower. It went back up in 2016. 5 bidders this time, a winning bid of $282,345 from a company called America's Castles, LLC, which then had a change of management and chose not to close. In 2021, 6 bidders pushed the price to $360,000. That deal also failed to close. In 2023, 10 bidders reached the exact same number, $360,000 again, and that winner also failed to close. As of this year's auction, the high bid stands at $370,000, and whether this 5th attempt actually closes is something we simply don't know yet. Here's the thing. At no point in that entire 17-year, 5-auction history was this listing fake. Every single one of those auctions ran through realestatesales.gov, GSA's real official portal. It's just been extraordinarily hard to actually finish the sale, for 4 different reasons across 4 different attempts. A buyer also can't freely modify the tower, since it's both an active navigational aid and a historic structure, and needs a separate submerged land lease from Connecticut's Environmental Agency on top of whatever they pay GSA. For context, this isn't even an unusually expensive lighthouse by GSA's standards. Nearby comparable lighthouse sales in past Fairfield area auctions have landed anywhere from about $90,000 to $190,000, and across roughly 2 decades, GSA's lighthouse disposal program overall has run more than 70 separate auctions, raising over $10 million combined. Penfield Reef isn't an outlier because of its price. It's an outlier because of how many times the exact same sale has almost happened. If a listing can look this dead and still be completely real, the next one shows what happens when a government sale involves actual, immediate money on the table. This one has a confirmed minimum bid of $5 million, and we could not confirm whether it actually sold for that or more, so we're not going to pretend we know. The station sits on 1.4 acres with direct water frontage on the Shark River, right at the Jersey Shore. The original station dates to 1871, predating the modern Coast Guard, with a 1967 operations building and a boat basin, pier, and seawall still standing. The Coast Guard shut it down in 2020 after a Government Accountability Office recommendation concluded that modern GPS-equipped boats out of a nearby inlet station made this one redundant. GSA listed it through its official public sale process, with bidding requiring a $500,000 registration deposit and $50,000 bid increments, soft closing in March of 2024. Local zoning would technically allow the waterfront lot to be split into as many as 8 single-family homes, and comparable homes in the immediate area have sold for as much as $5.8 million. Here's the honest downside, on top of that unconfirmed final number. Reporting at the time noted the existing buildings would likely be raised by whoever wins, meaning nobody is buying a move-in-ready property here. You're bidding on waterfront land with a $5 million floor, tear-down condition structures, and your own demolition and construction costs stacked on top before you'd ever break ground on those 8 homes. The station's own history runs deeper than most people would guess. Local historians trace its role as a life-saving and surfman station back before the modern Coast Guard even existed as an agency, decades before that 1967 operations building went up. We looked for a closing price and a named buyer through every source we could find, and came up empty. That's exactly the kind of gap this whole video is about. A completely real GSA auction, running through the real government channel, where the actual outcome simply isn't public yet. Verified process, incomplete paper trail. Up next is one where the paper trail is airtight, and the final number is public. It's just that GSA itself didn't want to be the one to say it out loud. This one sold for $24.26 million, and GSA's own press release about the sale never once mentions that number. The building is 940,000 square feet on 3.4 acres at 301 7th Street Southwest, most recently used by the Department of Homeland Security before sitting vacant since March of 2025. It actually started life as a 1920s warehouse before being converted into federal office space. GSA sold it through a competitive public sale to an affiliate of Dalian Development, whose CEO has talked publicly about converting it into housing, retail, and restaurant space. That $24.26 million figure, a little over $25 per square foot for nearly 1 million square feet in the nation's capital, doesn't come from GSA at all. It only shows up in real estate trade press covering the deal afterward. GSA's own announcement talks about the savings instead. More than $200 million in deferred maintenance the government no longer has to cover, $5.5 million a year in operating costs eliminated, and roughly $500 million in future required upgrades that are now somebody else's problem. And that's the honest downside. Right there in GSA's own numbers, the government sold this building at a steep discount precisely because of that deferred maintenance burden. $200 million of neglected upkeep and $500 million in needed future work is exactly why a nearly million-square-foot federal building in downtown D.C. went for barely more than $24 million. The buyer inherits a genuinely difficult, capital-intensive office-to-residential conversion with no guarantee it works out financially. GSA has also framed this sale as just the first of a larger wave. The same initiative is projected to eliminate roughly $5 billion in delinquent maintenance and operating costs across other federal buildings still on the list. Real sale, real government channel, real price. Just not a price GSA wanted to put in its own press release. That brings us to the biggest number on this entire list, and this time, GSA said the number itself, loudly. This one sold for $137 million, $6 over an even number, which is its own small proof that this was a real competitive auction and not a number someone made up. The 17.36-acre property was a U.S. Geological Survey Office campus before USGS finished relocating off the site in January of 2025. GSA then ran a sealed bid auction. 3 separate bid packages came in ahead of the deadline, and San Francisco developer Presidio Bay won with a bid of $137 million and $6, with plans for a mixed-use redevelopment of housing and commercial space. The disposal was authorized under a federal law aimed at accelerating exactly this kind of sale after the property was flagged back in 2020 as one of 12 federal high-value assets recommended for a faster exit. GSA says the sale saves taxpayers roughly $107 million in deferred maintenance the government would otherwise have paid, plus about $4 million a year in ongoing costs going forward. GSA has tied this same reform effort to a much larger list of federal properties, projecting more than $430 million in potential annual savings across everything else still queued up for disposal. Here's the honest downside, and it echoes Penfield Reef Lighthouse at a completely different scale. This is not the first time GSA tried to sell this exact property. A prior auction attempt in 2022 closed with no winning bidder at all. Nobody bid enough to meet the government's terms, and the whole process had to start over, taking 3 more years to actually finish. And even now that it's sold, the promised 600 to 1,000 housing units still have to clear local entitlement and permitting before a single one gets built. A real, completed, $137 million government sale can still take years longer to turn into an actual building. 5 properties, One listed with no sale yet, one with a 17-year history of almost closing, one with a confirmed price nobody will confirm was ever paid, one where the government hit its own sale price, and $137 million that came in $6 over a round number. Every single one of them ran through a real government channel. So the title's claim was half right. A lot of what you'll find searching government surplus property online really is years out of date or an outright fake auction site built to steal your payment information. That part of the myth is true, and it's backed by a real federal audit showing these sales can take a median of 3 years, sometimes 20. But most listings are fake was never the accurate version of that story, and these 5 prove it. A lighthouse still waiting for its first buyer, a lighthouse that's failed to sell 5 times without ever being fake, a Coast Guard station with a confirmed floor price and an unconfirmed ceiling, a DC office building that sold for a number GSA wouldn't say itself, and a $137 million campus sale that took 2 tries and will take years more to finish. If you actually want to check one of these yourself, the rule is simple. Verify it on the government's own portal, realestatesales.gov or GSA Auctions, not on a third-party site claiming to represent it. This is informational content, not real estate, financial, or legal advice, and every price, status, and availability detail here can change by the time you're watching this. So, the 17-year lighthouse or the $137 million campus? Tell us which one you'd actually bid on.